want to introduce Derf Johnson, who's the Deputy Director of Montana Environmental Information Center, a native Montanan who has testified in front of our committee, and I'm just going to give him a few moments to describe how the FEC allows foreign corporate special interest interference to provide interference in local elections, particularly on public health matters that have occurred in the state of Montana. So, Derf, thanks for being here, and the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Representative Morelli, and thank you for inviting me today. I'm honored. Honorable members of Congress, again, my name is Derf Johnson. I'm the Deputy Director of the Montana Environmental Information Center, and I'm here to tell a little bit of a story about some real-world impacts, both with Citizens United as well as the broader deregulation of the FEC and the extremely harmful impacts to people across this nation, and in particular in my home state of Montana. As a native Montanan, and like many others, I hold a common sentiment of valuing and caring for the land. Montana is home to the first national park. It's a place where we still have the same flora and fauna that existed at the time of the Lewis and Clark expedition. And it's the setting for a river runs through it, where the famous words are, "There's no clear line between religion and fly fishing." Montana's landscape, our waters and our forests and our mountains are clearly the identity of our state. And I'd like to think that we do go above and beyond in trying to protect that place, both to protect our heritage as well as to protect our economy. Unfortunately, since territorial days, Montana has suffered from what I'd call political exploitation and corruption, owing in large part to an immense mineral wealth that we have in the state. And that has resulted in a lot of corporate profiteering. What we call this sort of corporate stranglehold at the turn of the century is the copper collar. And Butte's copper barons exerted an enormous amount of political control over our economy and our politics. They bought a U.S. Senate office. In 1912, Montana reacted to this by passing what we called the Corrupt Practices Act, which was a prohibition on corporate expenditures in our election system. And that law remained intact for well over a century until the Citizens United decision ultimately voided that. Today, and especially today, there's an unwarranted amount of political or corporate influence in our politics. And a lot of that's due to our small population and our relatively cheap media market. And so we have a lot of corporate participation in our elections. Over the years, Montana has also had a really unfortunate relationship with hard rock mining. Many of you have probably heard about the Berkeley Pit, which is the largest Superfund site in the nation as it travels down the Clark Fork River. Or a more recent example would be Montana Tunnels just south of my home, which is now a recently defunct mine, over $20 million under bonded in bankruptcy and responsible for obliterating a trout stream. And these examples are sort of pockmarked across our state. And so due to that history, Montanans are very skeptical of mining proposals, and it's a very contentious aspect of our politics. Mining has to contend with certain safeguards in our state, and the most notable being that we have in our Montana Constitution an explicit right to a clean and healthful environment. And that right often helps to dictate our permitting process. And we, of course, like many other states, also have in our Constitution a ballot initiative process. We have these provisions in part to protect places like the Smith River, which is a really important place in Montana. It's Montana's only permitted recreational river. It flows 59 miles through a pretty majestic limestone canyon without any public access points, and it's an absolutely coveted permit to get. In 2025, just this month, an economic report came out that said that economic activity in floating that river resulted in approximately $23 million for our state economy, and that's significant in a state with just a little over 1 million people. Unfortunately, in 2015, an Australian mining corporation proposed a hard rock mine at the headwaters directly underneath and adjacent to the most important tributary of the Smith. And since that time, I've been working in a coalition that's been fighting that mine ever since. And it's against sort of this backdrop that we worked to try and pass I-186, which was a Montana ballot initiative. And that ballot initiative would have prevented what we call perpetual pollution, acid mine drainage, which is the result of mining when you expose sulfide ore to air and water. And it's been really the death sentence for a lot of rivers and streams in Montana. It impacts the aquatic life, and it basically devoids them of life. Picture behind me is of acid mine drainage resulting from the Zortman-Landusky mine site, just at the headwaters of the Fort Belknap Indian community, one of their water sources. And this pollution is leaking down into their teepee grounds at this point. It is a poster child for problems in the mining industry. And so this ballot initiative would have addressed both these historic wrongs as well as required more stringent standards to prevent this type of activity. Sandfire, unfortunately, the company that was proposing the mine at the headwaters of the Smith, took a great deal of interest in this ballot initiative because their proposal was in what you call a massive sulfide zone, which it really is the precursor to acid mine drainage. And so this company took $285,000 of Treasury dollars from Australia and injected it into this Montana ballot initiative. And as you can imagine, this raised some real concerns for us. If we can have foreign corporations contributing to ballot initiatives, local ballot initiatives in Montana, what's the universe of funding that we're going to have to fight against? And why should they be able to do it? And so we filed a FEC complaint in October of 2018 based on those concerns. And what we thought was black letter law on campaign finance, which barred citizens from foreign citizens from participating in our election system. The complaint was dismissed by a majority of the FEC, and commenting on that dismissal, a commissioner expressed her alarm at her colleagues voting to allow such foreign interference in American political life, noting that a company based halfway around the world made a sizable donation interjecting itself in hopes of future profits into a political debate in Montana over mining and the quality of Montana's waters. Balancing the economic and environmental concerns reflected in the ballot measure and uniquely affecting the state's residents is precisely the type of exercise of democratic self-government that should be protected from foreign influence. So since Citizens United and the deregulation of our election system, the universe of money funding elections in Montana is now much broader, and those interests and those monies often serve far-flung interests from the concern of everyday Montanans. And those interests don't need to necessarily drink our water and breathe our air and participate in our democracy in Montana. And so with that, it is beyond past time to overturn Citizens United and restore integrity into our election system. Thank you for having me today.